All right. Well, I think we might be streaming. I'm not positive because this thing OBS changed a little bit. How you doing, everybody? Chuck Holton here. Sherchick asks for an update on Ukraine. If you would like me to do a video about Ukraine, just hit yes. Just put yes in the comments, and if we get a bunch of people that actually want to hear about Ukraine, I will go ahead and do one. Most of the time, when I say anything about Ukraine, I actually lose subscribers because so many people are just salty on Ukraine. But as you may know, I spent about 6 months there covering the war. I was there 3 weeks before the war started in Ukraine, and have been back a bunch of times since. So if you want to hear about what's going on in Ukraine, I still have a lot of contacts there and keep up with Ukraine on a pretty regular basis. So we could do some updates on that if you want. Looks like most people say yes. There's a few people say no. If you say no, Sean, Rob, I would be interested to know why you don't want to hear about Ukraine. Why you don't care what's going on there. Does it just make you angry because they're getting American money? Well, Israel, which we're going to talk about today, has been granted $14 billion extra after the war began in October 2023. They haven't received most of that yet. They've, it hasn't been dispersed by Congress, but there's a lot of money going to places around the world to deal with geopolitical issues. That's one of the ways the United States avoids sending blood, shedding blood to deal with these things, is we just send money instead. So rather than send our sons and daughters to fight for things these days, we would prefer usually to just send a check, kind of phone it in. I used to say all the time that if we had a, congressional mandate or even a constitutional amendment that said if we want to support a fight overseas, we should have to send troops and put boots on the ground, because that would dramatically reduce the number of conflicts that we get involved in, for obvious reasons. And just sending weapons to a conflict isn't always in our best interest long term. Short term, it might be. But weapons are durable and fungible. And because of that, they will probably end up shooting back at us at some point in the future. For example, there are Vietnam-era weapons that we left in Vietnam that are now shooting back at our Border Patrol agents across the U.S. southern border. Those weapons can be, if they're maintained, can be lethal for decades or even centuries to come. It's not impossible to go get yourself a Mosin, what am I trying to say? I just spaced on the, like Mosin Galant or something like that. Not Mosin Nagant rifle, which was, I think there were more Mosin Nagant rifles made than any other rifle in history, and followed closely by the AK-47. But Mosin Nagant rifles were made in World War I, and they're still available today, and they're still good weapons. You could still deer hunt with a Mosin Nagant, no problem. Up until just a couple of years ago, you could pick up a Mosin Nagant for $70. And the thing is, it's so old that it doesn't actually qualify as a firearm in the United States because it's more than 100 years old. So we need to be very careful about who we're giving those kind of weapons to. Now, bigger weapons, the kind of weapons that we're giving to Israel and to Ukraine, are a little different than that, because in reality, you know, a HIMARS unit is not going to end up on the black market and end up shooting back at us, because we can track those things. We know right where they are, even if we've given them to other people. And they take very high technical knowledge, and they take trained teams to run them. And you can't just sell them to Ghana and worry about not worry about those things. It's not like an RPG or something like that. Now, the man pads, yeah, that's a problem. We've left or given thousands of javelins, for example, javelin missiles to Ukraine. And javelin missiles could be used by just about anybody. I'm not saying a monkey could use one, but a really smart monkey maybe. So we probably should put trackers on those things if we're going to be handing them out like candy. But if you don't believe that we should be giving money to foreign countries, I hear you. I hear you. I mean, I'm not big on paying taxes either. And I don't think the government is very smart about how they spend our tax money. So I understand that. The problem that we run into, and this is true for Ukraine, it's true for Israel, and it's true for every other country we give money to, is that if we don't do something to support these countries, then other countries will. And if other countries will, that means that the United States won't have any say in what they do. We won't have any pull when it comes to controlling what they do. So, you know, the United States, for good or for ill, has been pulling very hard against the Israelis to try to keep them from doing lots of different things that they have done or not done. There's a good chance that the strike that we saw on Iran was as muted as it actually was, meaning that they only went after military targets for the most part, rather than infrastructure or oil or, you know, things, power grid, stuff like that. Because the United States was pushing them not to do it. Now, on that note, let's just get to some real news here. The Iranians have been agitating now. The Iranian government has been saying that they will respond to this attack that just took place on their country. And at first, they kind of acted like they were not going to respond. Now they're kind of feeling like they have to, because they've basically been embarrassed before the entire globe. They've been embarrassed because the Israelis took out their entire air defense array and were able to hit some fairly sensitive sites that set back their missile program quite a few years, probably. And so we're learning more and more about how much of an effect those strikes had as time goes on. And as the world learns more about how badly the Israelis spanked the Iranians in that attack, the Iranians are feeling the heat that they're going to have to respond, and they're going to have to try to save some face, because I tell you, it's not just the Western world who is seeing how badly they got spanked. It is the Arab world who is seeing that. And so they've lost a lot of clout in the Arab world because they just got decimated in terms of their air defense capabilities. The problem that they face is that now they don't have any air defense. Not that the air defense made much of a difference, because the Israelis managed to strike everything they had and not lose a single aircraft in the process. So it's not, they're not really any worse off than they already were. All the air defense that they had before was sort of a false hope for the Iranians, because it wasn't actually effective, right? But now they know they don't have any air defense, And now they know that the Israelis can come in anytime they want, can waltz right into their country, and can drop lots and lots of bombs on things that will really, really, really hurt. And so, and on one hand, the Iranians are saying we have to respond. On the other hand, they're going, if we respond, the Israelis are going to clean our clocks. What are we going to do about this? So that's a good position for the Israelis to be in, for sure, without a doubt. Now, let's get to the topic of the live tonight, and that is to talk about the United Nations and their proxy, or their UNRWA. Let's see, I just want to make sure that I'm still on. Yeah, we got 1,500 people online, folks. Please go hit the like button. It will help YouTube to show this live to more people. So we're only 10 minutes in. If we show this live to a lot more people, then the channel grows, and it makes it easier for me to keep doing this job and keep bringing you the news. We keep, we just had a meeting today with our business manager and our operations manager, I guess is what she wants to be called. And I'm very excited because she's coming up with lots of new stuff that we're going to roll out as far as content to keep you coming back. And we're going to we're coming up with a lot of great stuff for our paying supporters. So if you go to chuckholton.com and you become a supporter over there for $7 a month, you will be able to get a lot of really cool extras that the non-paying supporters are not going to get. So like, for example, the downloadable copy of the book that I just finished called Death of Civilization. And it's not just a treatise on how far America has fallen in terms of our civility, but it is a whole big list of checklists for you to be able to prepare your family to be safe in the coming days. As we come up on this election, there's a very good chance that there will be some unrest around the election. And that unrest is now not just confined to the inner cities. It is coming out into the suburbs, and it may well affect you. So if you want to know how to keep your family safe, you want to go over and become a supporter on chuckholton.com. And then you can get a copy of that book right away with all the checklists that you can go through for your neighborhood, your house, your church, your body, your family, that sort of thing, and help you put together a plan to stay safe, even in a loss of civility, even if another hurricane hits, no matter what, you'll be prepared. What I've noticed is that a lot of preparedness books don't actually come up with checklists and concrete things that you can do. And so that's what we want to do. We want to give you concrete things that will actually help make you safer, that don't cost a lot of money. They're just things that a lot of people don't think about in terms of their preparedness. And I've been working on this for years, so I'm really excited to get it out. And that's why I put it out in PDF form, so you can just download it rather than going and getting a soft cover of the book and having to have it mailed to you. We will release the soft cover as soon as possible, but I wanted to get it out to you before the election. So, so KP1 says, I printed a hard copy today. Yeah, you're welcome to do that, and you're welcome to share it. I don't mind, because you would share it if it was a hard copy. It's very good to print that stuff off, because when you need it, it's good to have it. It's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Okay, so let's talk about UNRWA. Now, UNRWA, the Israeli Knesset passed two bills, 92-10, all but unanimous, with even support from parties that oppose Benjamin Netanyahu, and only one party abstained, as far as I can tell. That's the Democrat Party, of course. And they voted on two bills that would block all activity of UNRWA in any area under Israeli control, which includes Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, Gaza, and the West Bank. So UNRWA is done in Israel. And I'm talking not just Israel where the Israelis live, but Israel where the Palestinians live as well. UNRWA in Nablus, UNRWA in Jenin, UNRWA in Gaza, UNRWA in East Jerusalem, done. Done, done, done. As a matter of fact, it should be called maybe GONRA, but that just sounds too much like an STD, so maybe not. But yeah, so I was trying to come up with a clever name, but I kept coming up with things that sounded like profanities or sexually transmitted diseases, so I just gave up. UNRWA has been banned. Now, this doesn't take effect immediately. It takes effect in about a month, I think. It's a short amount of time. And here's some very good quotes. UNRWA long ago ceased to be a humanitarian aid agency. Is that not true, or what? In addition to it being an integral supporter of terror and hate, it's an agency to eternalize poverty and suffering. Amen. Preach it. Look, UNRWA was concerned about UNRWA, not concerned about the Palestinians. Other UN refugee agencies have as their goal to get people to the point where they're no longer a refugee. If you go, for example, go look at some place where UNHCR, the UN High Commission for Refugees, is working. I can't say that they always do a great job, but their goal, at least, in Ecuador, for example, you got Venezuelan migrants that are coming to Ecuador, and UNHCR helps them out there. Their goal is to get them to integrate into Ecuadorian society and then, and then be done with them. But UNHCR is not like UNRWA. UNRWA, their goal was to perpetuate the refugee status of the Palestinians forever, which would, because, I mean, think about it. If all of the Palestinians in Gaza eventually, I mean, we're a couple of generations in now since 1947. So the people that live in Gaza, there's essentially nobody left in Gaza who was pushed out of Israel. There are very few people left. One Tired Mama likes NUNRWA. That's good. Yeah, we could go with that, NUNRWA. There's not very many people left in Gaza who were actually pushed out of their homes, and really there weren't any that were actually pushed out of their homes. They left their homes because they thought, they were told by the other Arab countries around them, just leave so that we can go in and wipe out the Jews, and then you can come back to your homes. But the Jews won the war in 1947, and they never got to come back. A lot of them still wear the key to the home that they had to leave, but those homes no longer exist. They've been torn down long ago. So there's nothing for them to return to. DUNRWA, that's a good one. You guys are great. You're better than me. NUNRWA. Okay, so the fact that most of the people living in Gaza, in Judea and Samaria, have been there their entire lives. Most of them are, about 70% of the people in Gaza are, I think, under the age of 25. And so they don't remember ever living in Israel because they never lived in Israel. They've always been in Gaza. Gaza is their home. And if Gaza is their home, then there's no real need for a refugee agency in Gaza anymore because there aren't any refugees left. They are now endemic to Gaza. But if that's the case, then UNRWA's more than $1.2 billion a year doesn't need to be given to them anymore. And so UNRWA was all about perpetuating the refugee crisis and convincing all of the people in Gaza, babies all the way up to old people, that you are still a refugee, you'll always be a refugee, your children's 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 children will always be refugees, just so that they can continue getting that sweet, sweet, sweet money from the United Nations, the United States, and other donors. They claim that they're the only workable humanitarian aid organization in Gaza. That's not true. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of aid organizations in Gaza. The World Kitchen, that, you know, they got one of their SUVs bombed a while back, is a very large one. There are tons of agencies, and tons of agencies that could take over inside Gaza. But UNRWA is trying to make the case that they're the only ones that could possibly do it. Now, think about this. I do want to be fair. I want to point this out, that if UNRWA was going to function in Gaza, they can't be pro-Israel, right? I mean, Gaza was run by Hamas. Hamas was voted in either legitimately or non-legitimately. We don't really know. But they were the elected authority inside Gaza. And if that's the case, then, well, UNRWA kind of has to play ball with them if they're going to do business inside Gaza. And so it's understandable to some extent that UNRWA is going to, you know, at least not be rah, rah, rah pro-Israel to do their work in Gaza. But they could just be professional and not take a stance. They could be neutral like many other NGOs and not take a stance, but that's not what they've done. They have apparently hired hundreds of Hamas operatives. Some of them were commanders in Hamas. Israel has identified between 9 and 12 Hamas commanders who took part in the massacre on October 7th last year that were UNRWA employees. They were in Israel raping and pillaging, and they were on the payroll for UNRWA, which means your tax dollars, if you are a US citizen, we're going to fund UNRWA. We're going to pay those UNRWA employees who were busy slaughtering people inside Israel on October 7th. Okay? So now the Israelis say that there are probably something like 250 UNRWA employees who were also affiliated very closely with Hamas. But they say that they know of at least between 9 and 12 of them who were in Israel participating on October 7th, okay? Now, for their part, the United Nations just completed an investigation of itself, which you can imagine how that's going to go. And the UN said that it looked at the evidence, and it agreed that 9 of its staff were inside Israel on October 7th. And so those 9 people have been sacked. And Israel's like, yeah, not good enough. You can go ahead and fire them. We are going to bring the fire to them. And they have been doing that. They have been they've been actively pursuing causing these 9 or 12 employees of UNRWA to spontaneously combust at some time in the very near future. Okay? Now, I just want to break down how much money we're talking about here. Think about this. If Israel just banned UNRWA from all territories inside all of Israel, including Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem, they just saved the United Nations $1.2 billion. And about 25% of that comes from the United States. Now, UNRWA also gets tens of millions, if not over 100 million, in donations from other organizations, George Soros and, people like that. But let's just talk about the fact that the United States has pledged, as I mentioned before, over $14 billion to Israel since the war began, but they haven't actually spent that money yet. It hasn't been released by Congress. There's actually been a very small percentage of that that's actually made it to Israel. They don't release those numbers, so we can't say exactly how much, but I'm going to say it's probably about 10%, just for the sake of argument. And so that'd be, what, 1.4 billion? Israel just saved the world as much as it has received from the United States, almost, by shutting down UNRWA in its territories. And the reason they're doing that is because, number one, UNRWA is not doing anything good for Israel, but it's also not doing anything good for the Palestinians. UNRWA is not helpful. The UN in United Nations is, in my opinion, should stand for unhelpful. Because, well, even UNHCR, all the other United Nations organizations I've ever had the misfortune of coming into contact with, UNIFIL in Lebanon, UNDOF in Syria, MINISTA in Haiti, the Organization for Immigration and Migration, OIM, in Panama, and all the way up from Venezuela into the United States, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These are all UN agencies, and they all end up exacerbating the problem that they are meant to address. They all end up making the problem worse. And I think that, I know without a doubt that there are many, many, many people, tens of thousands of people working for these UN agencies who have good hearts, that want to help, that want to do a good job. But the system is set up to cause these things to exacerbate the problems they're meant to fix. And there is always that sort of underlying pressure, that conflict of interest, that if you actually solve the problem, if you actually get people out of their poverty, if you actually get them out of being migrants, if you actually get them to move along and be productive citizens, move somewhere else, whatever, well, then you don't have a job anymore. You just worked yourself out of a job. It's a problem that virtually every government agency has, and every humanitarian aid organization suffers from these problems. As a matter of fact, the United States government has 18 million or more. I think it's more than that now. At one time it was 18 million employees of the US federal government. And you could probably wipe out 90% of those and the government would actually run better, right? There's so much plaque, institutional plaque built up in these agencies that, like George Patton said, if you got rid of 2/3 of them, nobody would even notice. So here's a question from Hannah. She says, many Western leaders are pressuring Israel not to ban UNRWA. Could they reverse the decision? Well, no, Israel has made this decision in contravention of all of these different Western leaders who are telling them not to do it. They've decided to do it anyway, and good for them, right? But the problem is that it's just the amount of pressure that's going to be put on Israel, right? Now, Norway, for example, is now seeking an opinion from the International Court of Justice on Israel's UNRWA shutdown decision. And I just found this out the other day. I want to make sure I'm right about that. Just a second. I saw this the other day. So the head judge of the International Court of Justice is from the United States, flaming liberal Joan E. Donahue. And, you know, she's obviously not going to make a unbiased decision on anything. Most of the judges that work for the ICJ are like that. KP1 is asking a question there, Connie. I'll get to that in a second. So, without a doubt, the United Nations is stacked against Israel. So now there is talk, because Israel has banned UNRWA from its territories, that the United Nations should kick Israel out of the UN. Okay? I wanted to Google that. Now, kicking somebody out of the United Nations is a fairly complicated process. What you're talking about is not just as simple as like having a vote. First of all, according to the UN Charter, I think it's Article 5, it's Article something. Article 6. Article 6 of the UN Charter says that a member state can be expelled if it has persistently violated the Charter. Now, the principles of the Charter, right, of the United Nations. Now, if you wanted to find a country that has persistently violated the principles of the UN Charter, the first place you should look is Russia. The second place you should look is Turkey. The third place you should look is maybe Azerbaijan. Okay? I mean, there are lots of countries that would be way ahead of Israel in line for being kicked out. If you want to find countries that have violated the principles of the Charter. But in order to do that, first you have to have a recommendation by the Security Council in the United Nations. So that would take 9 votes and no veto from any of the 5 permanent members, which is United States, United Kingdom, Russia, China, France. Okay? Given the U.S. strong alliance with Israel, they are known for, I mean, they could be, even under a Biden administration, could be counted on to probably veto that measure. So they're not going to allow Israel to be kicked out of the United Nations. After that, though, if they cleared that hurdle somehow, if Israel was, you know, like having a barbecue with, you know, little kids or something, then, and everybody went against them, and the United States even wouldn't veto it, then they would, and everybody voted for it, then it would have to be approved by the General Assembly, and they would have to have a 2/3 majority in order to pass it. Well, that first one's not going to happen, and the second one certainly is not going to happen. But it's not going to stop the UN from trying. The UN has been consistently condemning Israel through many resolutions long before the war started in Gaza. In 2023, for example, the General Assembly passed 14 resolutions that criticized Israel, and that was twice the number of all other countries combined. In 2022, they had 15 anti-Israel resolutions, and I think 13 or so against all other countries. This is consistent. This has happened over and over and over again. Now, we got another question here. Maybe there will be less spies with UNRWA gone. Well, I guess it can't hurt, Patrick. Let's put it that way. I think you're probably not wrong about that. So I'll agree with that one. Please hit the like button, folks. Let's see, we got 2,500 people online and about half that many likes. So half of you don't like it, or you just haven't gone over there to just smash that like button. It does help. Now, Rissa, let's see, somebody's talking about there's propaganda on both sides. Let's see, oh, I see. Oh, you guys are talking about something else. I get thrown off when there's like other conversations going on in the chat, and I go into the chat and just catch the tail end of it. Okay, Andrew Kirby says, do you think the UNRWA supplies Israel weapons throughout their time in Gaza? No, Israel does not supply weapon to Israel. They don't supply weapons at all. That's not UNRWA's job. They help Hamas. They've been caught helping Hamas hide weapons in Gaza. They have found Hamas weapons inside lots of UNRWA schools and headquarters and other UNRWA facilities. As a matter of fact, I've been told by some people who are very, very close to the matter that have been in Gaza a lot, that if they want to find a bunch of weapons, all they have to do is go look for a building that says UNRWA on it, and they're pretty sure that they will find something inside. It's absolutely crazy how long this has been allowed to go on. If you go over to chuckholton.com, I put up a documentary the other day, and it's available for everybody to watch, that specifically they went into UNRWA schools and they interviewed students in those schools. These are like elementary school kids, and asked them questions about Israel. And they're like, oh, Israel's terrible. And we have to, if I said the things on this live that they said about Israel, about what they wanted to do to Israel, this live would get demonetized and I'd probably get kicked off YouTube. They have been teaching these children in UNRWA schools for decades that Israel is Satan, they're the enemy, they're the little Satan, they're, all that. Super, super, super negative. And, at the very beginning of the war, Benjamin Netanyahu said in a speech that one of his goals for this conflict was to not just wipe out Hamas, but to wipe out the thought process that brought about Hamas, to wipe out the worldview that taught children to hate. And I was like, you know what? You're not going to do that. Well, I didn't expect them to get rid of UNRWA. Getting rid of UNRWA is a big step in that direction. It probably won't completely stop the Palestinians from teaching their children to hate Jews, but it certainly is a big step in that direction because UNRWA has a lot of reach. A lot of kids go to UNRWA schools. And you might say, well, now the kids don't have schools to go to. Well, let's let some other organization come in and set up schools. Most of the schools in Gaza have been decimated, bombed to smithereens, not because they're schools, but because Hamas has a very bad habit of using schools, not just UNRWA schools, but all schools, as places to hide. And I'm really, really fed up with how the mainstream media has stopped qualifying the death count in Gaza. They just are now parroting without qualification the numbers that the Hamas-led Gaza Health Ministry puts out. So they will have an airstrike on someplace. They'll hit someplace, Israel will. And before the smoke even clears, the Gaza Health Ministry will come out with, oh, they killed 15 children, or 15 children were killed, whatever. There's no possible way that they could know that. They don't have names. They don't have any information about that. They haven't even finished, digging people out of the rubble. And in reality, there's no way they could ever know how many people were actually lost their lives in Gaza, because there are a lot of people that are under the rubble. That's not Israel's fault. Keep in mind, that is Hamas's fault, because October 7th, and because Israel has done a lot to warn people to get out of the way before they drop a building. So if there's anybody left in there, it's not Israel's fault. It's right at the feet of Hamas. Now, Mick says, do you think Israel is waiting for the outcome of the American elections to hit Iran's nuclear sites? I think the United States wants Israel to wait for the outcome of the elections to do anything. And Israel has already said that it's planning a second wave of strikes against Iran in retaliation for their attempt to assassinate Benjamin Netanyahu at his home in Caesarea Maritima the other day. And so it's likely that in the coming days or weeks, we will see another large attack on Iran. I wonder what they have up their sleeves for that. They're teasing it by saying that they will use methods and technologies that have not heretofore used in the conflict. So that'll be interesting. I guess we'll see. The answer is maybe. KP1 says, Chuck was reading Lamentations today. Am I the only one that feels like the lines have been crossed and the dam is about to break worldwide? Well, it could be. It could just be that we have a weak and feckless American government who is not keeping a lid on things around the world. If you recall, things were much calmer during the first Trump administration. And that's because Trump was just crazy enough. People didn't know how he was going to react. And if they couldn't figure that out, they weren't going to go ahead and, go move forward with their plans of conquest around the world, because who knew what Trump was going to do? And so I guess that's a good argument for electing somebody who's just a little bit crazy, a little unpredictable. But so it could be, but we don't know. Is Israel waiting to finish its wars with Hamas and Hezbollah to hit Iran hard? I don't think so. Why? Because Iran really has the ability only to lob tubular complaints at Israel. That's really all they can do. They don't have an air force that can fly over Israel and drop a bunch of ordnance. They don't have an expeditionary army that can march across Iraq and Syria or Jordan and march into Israel. So the only thing they can do is lob ordnance at Israel, and Israel has pretty well shown that it can defend itself against that. And so I think Israel is kind of like, we'll deal with whatever Iran decides to send our way. We're about as worried about Iran as we are about the Houthis at this point. Iran is now becoming sort of a sideshow. And on that note, good news out of Lebanon, the IDF declared today that it has accomplished its primary objectives inside Lebanon, and that the Israeli government can now move forward with wrapping up the conflict in Lebanon through diplomatic means. Now, that's an interesting way to put that. They're not declaring victory per se, and they're still striking very hard. They struck Tyre yesterday, and today they're striking Sidon tonight. I've been to Sidon, and that's fairly close to the border. And they have decapitated Hezbollah to a massive extent. Hezbollah doesn't have any leadership left. Now, they just declared a new leader for Hezbollah, and this guy, you can imagine he's not buying any green bananas right now. His name is Naim Qassem, and he's hiding, they think, in Iran, as if that's going to shield him from the Mossad. I give him a matter of weeks at the most. This guy's got a very short lifespan, most likely. And he's the guy that was shown on camera making an announcement and dabbing the sweat off his brow like he was waiting for a hellfire to come through the window at any moment. We're unsure where he is, but it's likely that he's not going to be able to do much because he doesn't have any lieutenants to talk to. He doesn't have any officers to talk to, and he doesn't have any way to communicate with his people. Do you think anybody's going to answer their cell phone or their pager at this point? So somebody was just asking about the difference between the THAAD missile system and the Arrow missile defense systems. Well, let's go through the differences here. First of all, the THAAD system stands for Terminal High Altitude Aerial Defense System, and designed by the United States. It came out in the 1980s, I believe, and it is designed to intercept short, medium, and intermediate range ballistic missiles in their terminal phase, where they're actually on the way down to the target. So a missile, when it fires, it has a takeoff, it has a cruise, and it has a terminal phase. So as it's coming back down in that terminal phase, that's when the THAAD missile system is meant to intercept it as it re-enters the atmosphere. And these things are, they're similar. The Arrow missile system was developed by both the United States and Israel. It is more of an advanced anti-ballistic shield against medium to long range missiles. So it has a longer range than the THAAD missile system does, but not by much, I don't think. The THAAD uses a kinetic interception method called hit to kill, which means it just collides with the incoming missile and takes it out. The Arrow uses the same system, but also has, it can do that in other phases, like in the cruise phase or whatever. It can even do that outside the atmosphere, which the THAAD cannot. So the THAAD missile system has to wait till it re-enters the atmosphere. The Arrow missile system can actually intercept missiles in space. And it actually has done that in this war for the first time ever, with a Houthi ballistic missile that was fired at it from Yemen. Now, the THAAD missile system is very mobile. It's on a truck. It can be driven around, and it can be rapidly deployed to any area that's under threat, whereas the Arrow missile system is fixed. It doesn't move. They put it in one place, and it's tailored basically for Israel, because Israel knows that it's got areas where it's going to always have to have missile defense, and so it can build Arrow missile systems there and just leave them. It doesn't need to move them around. So THAAD is a little more flexible. Arrow is maybe a little more, it's a little newer, and it's a little more technologically advanced, but not by much. They're very similar. Hope that answers your question about those two. Joseph Dixon is asking, how much is it to go on an Israel tour with me, Chuck? Well, it's a lot, because I'm not doing any more Israel tours. We did one, and it went well, and everybody had a great time. And I don't know that I'm going to do those again. We are going to continue doing tours to Armenia for very specific reasons, in that Armenia needs the tourism very badly, and it is an absolutely amazing place. See, I really like doing the tours to places where, like, you don't know anybody who's been to Armenia. And you're like, what, Armenia? Where even is that? I don't even know where Armenia is. That's the kind of places I like to take people. I like to show you things you've never even heard of. And especially Armenia, because it's like a combination between Israel and Switzerland. It's like ancient, stuff and ancient Christian history. Mount Ararat is right there, and all that. But also it's as beautiful as Switzerland. It's just an incredible place. It's also very, very cheap. It's also got this kind of cool, like James Bond flavor because of the vestiges of the Soviet Union that are still there. And last but not least, I have a son and daughter-in-law and a little baby granddaughter who live there. And so I like to go visit them. Israel is fun, but gosh, there is 9,000 tour agencies that you can do a tour to Israel with. There aren't any American tour agencies for the most part that are doing tours to Armenia. And so I like those. I like the stuff that's just like out there, just weird. I might do a tour to Kazakhstan or Turkmenistan or someplace like that because, who's going to do that? I thought about doing tours to northern Iraq, Kurdistan, because nobody goes there, but there's actually some cool stuff to see there. I would love to do some tours to Ukraine once things sort of simmer down there a little bit. And so we have a tour set up to Armenia in June, but I don't think there's going to be any slots available for that because we're opening it up first to people who have been on other tours with us before. And we're getting to the point where a lot of people love our tours so much that they want to come on multiple tours with us. So if we don't fill it up with repeat offenders, we're going to open it up to my supporters next on chuckholton.com. And if it's not full there, I'll be really surprised because we've got several thousand supporters now on chuckholton.com. So if you want to get in the running to go on one of those tours with me, you can do so by becoming a supporter at chuckholton.com. And then if there's any slots left, we might open it up to just anybody. But I think that we want to vet people a little better than that this time. We did 5 tours total this year, and they all went great. And we loved the people that we met on them. And we learned from each one of those tours. We're getting really, really good at that whole tour thing. One of the things that I think I may do this coming year, rather than doing a tour to Israel, is I'm going to do a staycation tour to Panama for people who are interested in maybe moving out of the United States or people that just need to take a few days off. We live in a volcanic crater up in the mountains of Panama that is super peaceful, tranquil. It's like springtime all year round. It's a birder's paradise. It's not hot and tropical with lots of big bugs and stuff. It's more pine forest. They call it cloud forest up here. It's like pine forest and kind of misty and just really nice and cool and springtime weather all year round up here. We don't use air conditioning in our house for the most part ever, really. I air condition this room and this room only just to keep the humidity out. But, it's like 75 degrees most of the time all year here. So I'm thinking about setting up a tour. I've had some pretty significant interest when I mentioned it the other day, where we would just bring people up here for like 5 days and you just chill out at an amazing resort and just rest and read and hang out with me. Come over here and meet the monkeys. We'll go for some hikes and we'll talk about stuff. Talk about what it's like to move out of the United States, what it's like to live in another country, and stuff like that. Any worst tour stories? Phoenix Design Guy, oh man, I could dish a whole bunch of terrible tour stories, but I won't because a lot of those people are still following the podcast. No, I'm kidding. We love all the people who came on the tours, but there's always crazy things that go wrong, and I thrive on that. The other thing that I might do is do some very, 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 very small tours. We're talking like less than 10 people to go someplace really crazy. I'm talking like Cartagena. Maybe do something where we go to specifically help some people like the single mothers that we support from Venezuela, or go out to the Darien Gap in the jungle here in Panama, or, you know, something that's like off the chain. Like you'd have to be vetted to make sure that you can hump a rucksack for a couple of miles up a mountain or something, because, or sleep on the ground or things like that. Like true Chuck Holton tours. The thing about the tours that we've done this year is that they're all pretty much just luxury tours, staying in nice hotels, having a nice coach tour bus take us around with, you know, it's good food and good wine and good, you know, just all that. If you want to travel like Chuck Holton travels, we're staying in $9 a night hotels and we're humping a rucksack and we're, you know, going 12 hours a day or more, that kind of thing. So if you're interested in those, you can always send me an email and ask to get on that list, but it's going to be a short list. And it would have to be kind of hand-picked, you know what I mean? So that's something that you can just send an email, hotzoneholton@gmail.com, and I'll talk about that. Okay, so Patrick Wickerstein says, would you take us to the Gap? Well, that's what I'm talking about. Maybe. It depends on how hardcore you are. You'd have to be pretty hardcore, though. Is there a lot of walking during the tours? Yes, there is. I hate to say, but we had a lot of people who were not able to fully participate on some of our tours this year, to Armenia especially, because there are places where you have the bus takes you as close as you can, and then you have to walk like a quarter mile to get to what we're there to see. And if you can't walk a quarter mile or go up several flights of stairs, then you probably shouldn't come. You know, if you can't hike a couple miles, then my tours are probably not the tours for you. Okay, have I been to Jesus' tomb? I've been to both places that they say are Jesus' tomb, yes. And you can go back in the YouTube archives there and find where I did videos out of those. Okay, so I think that's probably it for tonight. Just to reiterate, the Israeli Knesset has voted 92-10 to ban UNRWA from all Israeli territories, including Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. And that means that that aid is going to have to get delivered by somebody else, and that'll just have to get done. Reagan Schmaltz says, how long does a passport last before you need to replace it with all your traveling? Me, I've had 3 different passports this year, but that's because I melted one of them by accident. What do you think will happen in the U.S. election? Do you think Trump will win? I don't know. I really don't know, and I'm not good at making predictions like that. It is a toss-up, so please go vote. Would you be interested in conducting a real mission trip to some of the places that you've helped, like the women in Colombia? Yeah, we did that this year. We took 10 people to Colombia. We stayed in a hotel that had no air conditioning, which was horrific. And we took a bunch of young guys and painted a church and helped those single mothers and that sort of thing. But again, it would be a hand-picked group if I was going to take them to that. Do you think Panama or Costa Rica is a better place to live in? I think Panama is better because it's cheaper. It's less communist. Costa Rica, believe it or not, is a very socialist country. Panama is not. And so they're both the same in terms of beauty. Panama and Costa Rica are right next to each other, so they're virtually indistinguishable in terms of beauty. But I really think that Panama is a better place to live overall for an American, just because it's a lot cheaper. So have I been to tour the Isle of Patmos? I've not been to Patmos. I would like to go, though. That'd be nice. So Remnant says he thinks Kamala will win. I've seen a lot of people saying one way and saying the other. I will just say this, as we count down here, go to chuckholton.com and download my book. Do what you got to do. Download my book, Death of Civilization. Do it before the election. I'm begging you, go through the checklist at the back of the book and make sure you are prepared, because I believe there will be unrest, either localized or generalized, that is in certain places or all across the country in the United States after the election, no matter who wins. So please, please, please go get that book. If you can't afford $7 for the membership, then just send me an email, hotzoneholton@gmail.com. I've passed out hundreds of free copies of the book, and I'm happy to do it because I want you to get this information. I mean it. It is important. And if I were you, I would make sure that on election night, I'm not anywhere near a large city. Okay? All right, so that's all I've got for today, folks. Thank you very much for watching the Hot Zone. Please subscribe to the Hot Zone if you haven't done that. I know a lot of people don't think of that, but it makes a huge difference. And just to go hit the subscribe button, it doesn't cost you anything. You're not going to get spammed. I'm not going to send you a bunch of emails you don't want. I really don't send out emails. One other thing, if you would be interested in a written newsletter with a wrap up of all the places I've been, some photos and that sort of thing that went out, like, let's say once a month, just say yes in the comments real quick, and I will pass that on to our business manager, because that's one of the things we talked about today, was putting together a newsletter for you guys every month. Just has some behind the scenes stuff about the things we're doing, the things we're planning, where we're going, and stuff like that I can't put out on YouTube, okay? So if you'd be interested in that, just hit yes, and we may or may not do it. Okay? All right. God bless you. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.